Good morning, everyone. This is Michael, and I'm substituting here for Tuya for a few more days. We're going to deal with the soul of nations today, but again, the music may not accompany us all the way. I'm just not sure. It's a question of the charge, and there is not sufficient. So let's see how we do. Otherwise, it'll just be a straight meditation. Well, it's important for all of us to help the soul of our nations emerge, to build the causal body of our nations. And then the hierarchy can have a greater effect, and the new esoteric schools will appear, and the new world religion will appear, and the method of initiation will gradually be offered by the returning Christ. But we have our part to play, and we have to know what is the soul. Our own soul, although there really is no such thing, we know that, and the soul of nations. So I'm going to read a little bit from the work, The Destiny of the Nations, and I won't be reading in Finnish, but I will in English, and then if Tuya wants to take this up again, she can in Finnish. And this little section is called the influence of the rays today. First, the most obvious and powerful force in the world today is that of the first ray of will and power. Let me say it is one of the rays that's very much involved in the externalization of the hierarchy, along with the second ray ashram and the fifth ray ashram so far, and others will be involved, of course. The Tibetan goes on about this first ray. He says, it works out in two ways. Number one, as the will of God in world affairs, which is ever the will to good. And by God we have to mean, in this case, Sanat Kumara in Shambhala, and behind him that from which he emanated, the planetary logos itself. Remembering that this first ray is very important on our planet because we have a first ray monad, and because our function will be the base of the spine center within our solar system and in relation to our solar logos. So this is working out in two ways. As the will of God in world affairs, which is ever the will to good. Think about that. The will to good. It's a beautiful thought, and it's something about which we have to know ever more as we apply it in our lives. The Tibetan goes on, steadily, if you study human history intelligently, you will see that there has been a regular and rhythmic progression towards unity and synthesis in all departments of human affairs. We might say a great coming together. Unity is not quite synthesis, but it's in the right direction. And finally, under the first ray, the second aspect of the first ray, synthesis, appears. Going on, this unity in multiplicity is the eternal plan. A unity in consciousness, a multiplicity in form. And that's a very important statement, unity in variety, the one and the many, unity in multiplicity. We have to be able to detect and work with both. And then we're talking now about how this ray works out, and point number 2, it works out as the destructive element in world affairs. This refers to man's use of this force of will, which is seldom as yet the will to good, in active expression. See, we have to build in the quality of goodwill and love before we can really exercise the will to good. But think about it in your own life and how you might be able to apply it, how it would work out in your surroundings and in relation to the people with whom you have something to do and the service work that you are engaged in. It's seldom as yet the will to good in active expression. Rather, it is something that leads, he says, to self-assertion or of the individual or the nation, and to war with its accompaniments. So he's, writing this in the 1940s, and indeed that was the result. Those 7 men in Germany received the Shambhala force in an inverted manner, and they rained war down upon the world. So it leads to war and its accompaniments, separation, selfish diplomacy, hate and armaments, disease and death. So these are all the undesirables that we have to learn to avoid. This is the force, says the Tibetan, which pours into the world from the major world center, Shambhala. The will comes from Shambhala, okay. At least with respect to our planet. Little is known of Shambhala. More will be known as you study this text and note how world affairs are taking shape before your eyes in accordance with my prevision, as presented to your limited vision, he says, and the obvious possibilities. These are necessarily the equally obvious effects of predisposing causes. Well, as a master, he can see the trends, and sometimes we don't know where the trends in humanity are taking us, but in fact, it is obvious to those who have this kind of insight. Now we're talking about Shambhala as the source of will. We cannot talk about it glibly, of course, because even the Christ, when he confronted this at the 6th initiation in the Garden of Gethsemane, it was a disturbance in his life, as the Tibetan has explained. He goes on, only twice in the history of mankind has this Shambhala energy made its appearance and caused its presence to be felt through the tremendous changes which were brought about. Now, let me say that there were some minor appearances, some Shambhala impacts, but he's talking about the really, really big effects. The first, when the first great human crisis occurred at the time of individualization of man in ancient Lemuria. This was a kind of initiation for our planetary logos, and Shambhala was involved. And point number 2, at the time of the great struggle in Atlantean days between the, quote, lords of light and the lords of material expression. They're called by different names, you know. Sometimes a dramatic name, lords of the dark face, they are called, and the positive forces, lords of the shining countenance. So it was really a decisive moment in the history of humanity on our planet, and to some extent the lords of light won that battle, but not sufficiently, not sufficiently, and the enemy remained active throughout the years, working to undermine the intentions of the divine plan. Now, I think that's all I'm going to read right now. This is a wonderful little book, The Destiny of the Nations, and we'll make our way through this. Now, much time has passed since it's been written, but the fundamentals are there. We find that to be the case. I'm working now on the externalization of the hierarchy, you know, having done some 200 and some pages in commentary, which you can find on Makara. And I'm noticing, you know, that it references a period of history, which is past, of course, 80 years ago, but the fundamentals are there, and they can be applied and should be applied to our present situation. And all of this, friends, is in preparation for the further teaching which Master DK is now preparing to give, and what he gives and its depth and extent will depend to a great deal upon the good use we've made of what is already given. I'm going to do this a little differently than if Tuya were here. And we have our, you know, uncertain music situation here, for which I apologize, but it will, let's just see. As we prepare to meditate on these matters, we absorb the white light and affirm the value of the triangle's work we do to help the soul substand all of our personal activities and outer affairs. We think for a moment what a planetary center is, a great inlet of force, something more than a nation, strictly speaking. And there are 5 of these inlets, and probably each one of us has something to do with one of them. They are not yet fully developed in the Far East, but here in the West, London, Geneva, and New York are, well, while not fully developed, at least considerably developed. I know of people who are attempting to help the Darjeeling Center emerge. And Tokyo is very strong, but it's the first ray from the materialistic aspect, and so some changes will have to occur there. Now, let's enter that space of consciousness which we consider to be the soul. Let's pull back from the instrumental aspect of ourselves and do our best to get a felt sense of what it is to be within the soul. The soul is surely the observer of our normal personality circumstances. And it is an inner space in consciousness. Do we really know what it is to be in this soul consciousness? There is a great sense of being within that which is perceived, within and behind, and beneath all of these sort of prepositions, but giving us an idea of interior space in consciousness. And sometimes we have to realize that we could shed our various vehicles, they could drop away, and be dissociated from us, body astrality, mind, and we would be in the soul space. And somehow we have to carry that space with us throughout our day and be able to look upon the world as if our fundamental inner location was this soul space. And think of all the people in the world as essentially souls, the outer appearance being very secondary to the inner purpose of expanding the soul consciousness. And when you greet someone, see someone, your attention is not on the outer person, but on that which is attempting to express itself from within, the consciousness aspect which in this solar system is being developed. So it's really a different way of looking at things, and to sustain it is our goal as students of esotericism. Now the important thing to realize is that the many souls in our particular nation make up one soul, one consciousness within the one consciousness or soul of humanity. So let's think about our nation, our particular nation. Can we find a way to get into and take our place within the soul of our nation? And if we could do that, what qualities would we discover? Let's take a little time to try to detect the soul of our particular nation and to take our place within it and to see what qualities would be there. can we really find in a subtle way that kind of energy which is the soul of our nation. And maybe there are certain places that you might go in your nation, places which represent the major chakras of the nation, where it is easier to sense the soul of the nation. When I was in Washington, D.C., I've been there, I think, a couple of times. There was something very special that could be sensed about America, let's say, as I am an American citizen, within the Lincoln Memorial. It carries something that reminds of the deeper promise of the United States of America, and each country has its deeper promise to be shared eventually, once really cultivated, with the many nations and peoples of the world. What is the deeper promise of your nation? Do you think you can go through your day as if you were operating not only as a soul, but somehow within the deeper promise that your nation holds, that is within the soul of your nation, promoting its best qualities? Because the soul is the quality of life, as Master DK has told us. So what are these qualities which we as souls, as units of consciousness, can reinforce and strengthen in our nation? Do you think there is perhaps among the many good qualities of your nation one that stands out as most important at this time especially? Of course, quite a study could be made, you know, of the astrology and rheology of your nation in relation to the soul qualities which you may be detecting. It's just like the evolution of the individual. We have to understand the energies which are contributing. But above all, the soul of our nation must not be simply an abstraction, some kind of mental concept that does not touch the heart. It's got to be felt. One has to have the touch. One has to touch these better energies which are meant to be expressed within the soul of our nation. And as we become more proficient at living as a soul, it's a certain perspective, and at living within the soul of our nation, reinforcing, helping to build its causal body, so that the higher spiritual energies can have a center of expression through our nation. The next step, of course, is to transcend national boundaries and to think of the soul of humanity as a whole. And then, as we're able to get into this inclusive energy, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they study war any more. and the members of the human race will be seen as our friends, certainly on the soul level. There are misguided personalities. There are evil personalities. Those conditions will have to be remedied over time. And for some it will take a long time. But karma will do its work. And in the world, as Master DK foresees it, the passports, the visas, the boundaries, the blockages will go away. And there will be a free flow of people here and there, getting to know each other, finding the soul in each other, sharing the friendship of what it means to be a human being, a shared humanity. And the intended brotherhood will develop. Hopefully by the end of the Aquarian Age, which will be ruled by the planet of the soul, which is Venus. I've been reading about the struggles of hierarchy and humanity during the Second World War, and above all else, the Tibetan is stressing as a method of rehabilitation, he's stressing the love of humanity. Page after page, the one great necessity, the love of humanity. So, if that is not firmly established yet in your consciousness, in my consciousness, it is a great objective, a great and necessary objective. To find the way through many prejudices and superficial judgments until, despite how people may present themselves and whether we like or dislike, are attracted or repelled, this great inclusive love of humanity characterizes our consciousness. So let's work on that. It will help our nation, it will help our groups, it will help us individually. And all the different beautiful qualities of the cultures of nations will be seen as gifts to the entire soul of humanity. and we will go beyond the great heresy of separateness, which at present is so confounding and which prevents the divine plan from taking place on the earth as it should. So when we think in national terms and international terms, let's be very sensitive to it all, not just intellectual concepts, but the felt sense of the qualities which can be offered and are being offered through the different nations of the world. And let's see a great redemption occurring so that the negative qualities of the personalities of nations can be redeemed, and just as the personality ray becomes a sub-ray of the soul ray, so these personal qualities of nations will become a useful subset of the soul qualities. And one day, humanity will benefit from all of these soul qualities which we have to feed, maintain, support, develop. We're not looking for homogeneity here. We're not looking for sameness. We're looking for unity in diversity. So friends, this is just a little variation on the meditation, the kinds of meditations we've been doing. But let us really get inside the soul and be the soul and appreciate soul wherever we find it, even on the broadest national levels and international levels. Let us always be looking for the soul. I want to thank you for being here, meditating together, sensitizing ourselves to the deeper dimensions of our relationships with each other, and trying to become an international, spiritual citizen of humanity. Outwardly, we are citizens of our nation, but we have to be spiritual citizens of the world and conscious members not only of the soul of our nation, but the soul of humanity. Now, we will continue to read from the Destiny of the Nations, hopefully until we pass through the entire book, as we are doing with the Glamour, A World Problem book. And it's necessary now, as never before, to review what Master DK has given us, because he's preparing to offer the third installment, and we want to be ready for that. So within the one soul, we salute each other, we greet each other soul to soul in soul friendship, and continue to, as a group, try to be of use to the hierarchy and its greater plans. Tomorrow morning we'll work with the attracting money for hierarchical purposes, same time, same station. And thank you for your meditative presence. Many blessings to everybody. Many blessings.